Hey there, bunnies. It's me. Thank you so much for your help in hitting 1,000 subs on YouTube. It means a great deal to both Raven and myself. When we started this journey, we were about maybe 400 subs or so, and now we're at the big 1K. So that just absolutely boggles the mind. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This is the promised Q&A video. Basically, bunnies submitted questions via a Google form. Those questions then were captured on an Excel sheet and tabulated and reformatted. And then I spent the last few days just kind of going through them and recording my thoughts on a Microsoft Word document. So I do have a document in front of me that I will be referencing. The main reason for that is because instead of having a off the top of my head sort of response, because I mean, let's face it, you're free to ask me whatever questions you want on a live stream. It's just sometimes I'm focused on other things instead. This time, this gets my full attention. So on are the questions. On your first date with Raven, what do you wish you had said to her but didn't? Why didn't you say it then? That's a great question. If I'm perfectly honest, I love Raven and we are together, so I really wouldn't change a thing. Just because everything said or not said led to where we are today. And Raven is my wife and is my partner. So as a fun reflective exercise though, I don't mind going over kind of, I guess, what could have been or what should pretend, or I guess what could have been. So I guess I need to start by defining like what first outing would constitute as our very first date, right? So, I mean, we've caught a meal together during lunchtime, and apparently I wouldn't stop talking there. I was really nervous, and so I just kind of kept yapping about. I wanted to make sure that there wasn't any sort of silence that may give away that I'm less than confident in that situation. And we did go bar hopping once, but I got really sick in the bushes, and Raven and her friend had to get me away from some potential hoodlums. So that was its own thing. But if I had to say what our first date was, I would say it was the time when we went to see 2 scary movies in the movie theater together. That was a trip. We had some food. We ended up getting a pound of candy each, and we also were able to actually take a look at a really cute animal bag. It was a bag with like rows of little cartoon animals on it that we both fell in love with, and Raven still has today. So I would say that would be our first date. And if I wanted to make things easier on myself, I suppose I could have told her that I really dislike scary or gory movies. And mostly, I mean, like I really, really don't like them. I don't want anything to do with them, and I don't want to be anywhere near them. But at the time, I didn't really say anything because I wanted things to go well, and I knew she really, really liked them. And I was just happy to have the opportunity to hang out with her, you know. And honestly, I didn't want to miss out just because I didn't like something. So I figured I could kind of tough out whatever it is that I didn't like, if that makes sense. Yeah. So good question though. Thank you. How are you so chill? How are you so chill? Meditation. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm very glad that you think that I'm chill, because most of the time I feel anything but inside, but I'm really, really glad that that is the perspective. I often find that it takes a consistent and conscious effort to be mentally wherever I am, during a stream at least, to stay centered. Oftentimes my biggest enemy to being, I guess, like chill or centered is that I can get stuck in my head in a very particular perspective. So, you know, if something throws me off the rails, or I end up kind of going off my internal script, I end up just sort of spinning around mentally, and then I sort of don't know what to do. I'm like a fish out of water. I find that anchoring myself or interacting with consistencies in my life help me to weather whatever chaos and erratic nature of potentially insightful events, let's say, or return to center when I am rocked off of it. Some ways that I break myself out of a perspective lock is to look at my girls, my cats. There's a certain simplicity in witnessing how they interact with the world in a very straightforward way. And that just makes things clear, and it makes me shift my perspective. I play the piano. There are different feelings that I have difficulty expressing or even recognizing that I'm able to exude or exercise or be in when I play. And that's something that I'm not very good at really expressing it in any other way. So playing the piano helps. I look at the sky. I've heard, and I tell this to the kids all the time, both my cats, I tell this to the kids all the time, looking at the sky for 10 seconds a day, well, not necessarily a day, but looking at the sky for 10 seconds at least is a good start to changing perspective, and it helps me feel connected to the world, and it also allows me to kind of realize how small I am in just everything. So in comparison, whatever it is that I'm stuck on seems really small. So that's another way. Video games, obviously, sometimes you need a distraction, and it helps me to distract and pass the time to allow me to return to an issue later when I may not have been able to before, right? I probably have another two. Let me see. What did I write down? Engage in a routine that is kind to myself. So as an example, something that I really, really enjoy, or something that is, I can really pay attention to details to bring me to the present, that's super helpful. Like if I'm making a sandwich, right? I know that sounds silly, but I love making sandwiches. But I like making sandwiches when I don't feel rushed and I don't feel like there's something pushing me, so I can kind of really pay attention to how much is the bread perspiring. Can I put it on a double, like a folded piece of paper towel in order to absorb the moisture underneath the top layer? Therefore, it keeps the sandwich, still dry, or I guess not soggy, right? And just paying attention to details, it really helps to bring me into the present. I wrote, stay away from my phone. That's a big one. I'm constantly on my phone, and I can tell myself it's for a number of reasons, but the fact of the matter is, when I make a conscious effort to stay away from my phone and then check in every once in a while throughout the day, I'm infinitely more here. I have a very limited amount of internal mental resources, and that kind of helps me to focus that limited amount of mental resources to what it is that I'm doing, and I feel better about myself, And then lastly, I wrote, oh yes, I don't know, is this okay to say here? Sometimes I just break down in private. Can I say that? I forget, I wrote that. I honestly sometimes break down in private, and that really shifts my perspective as well. Obviously not a fun thing, and I don't look to do that, but I figured I'd be honest about it. Oh, well, HB's always the honest one, isn't he? Well, yes. Sometimes I break down in private, and it's a reset. Sometimes you got to hit the bottom in order to come on out, and then you feel very zen. So as far as meditation, that's probably more healthy. But yeah, sometimes I bounce off the limiters, if that makes sense. So good question. Good question. Between you and Raven, who is the most nerdy? Ooh, well, I guess it depends in what way, right? I got to say that in many ways, I would say that Raven is nerdier than I am, because she really goes all in on whatever she finds interesting, and she loves science. So she thinks science is really cool. She loves reading papers, articles, things like that. She loves reading studies. She likes to compare the output of a study to another one. She doesn't shy away from something, even if it's considered difficult to understand. In fact, she actually is drawn to something because she's told that it is difficult. She's one of those people. And I would say that I'm nerdy in the sense that I like numbers, I like comparisons, I like making Excel sheets, I like all of that, the differences in statistical lines, which is probably why I really enjoy turn-based strategy games and all of that. So in that sense, with the numbers and everything, I guess I'd be more nerdy in that way. I hope that answers the question. I bumped into you on a 3-year-old Battletech video because of the YouTube algorithm, which is kind of lucky. Oh, yes, it is. Thank you. How do you think your streams have improved since then? Did you see yourself still streaming now way back then? I'm glad that you are. Well, that's very kind of you. Thank you so much. I think I'm very lucky that you bumped into me over a really old video Battletech, so I count my blessings and thank you for watching. How have my streams improved since 3 years ago? Well, 3 years ago is post moving out here in the Pacific Northwest. So I'd say the biggest improvements come from streamlining the stream and trusting in myself more. So what I mean by that, streamlining the stream, I used to have different betting systems. I would have, if there was a feature, I would add features on top of what I already had. It was a very complicated process to stream because I would practice. It was almost like playing StarCraft, you know, like I'd have different music cued for different emotions and feelings and things like that. And I'd be tapping and fading in and all of that live, which is its own kind of joy when I execute well. It's kind of like playing DDR or something like that. Oh yeah, I wrote this. A typical battle stream had stream alert, reactive lighting, music with fades on a soundboard for different in-game situations, different types of bets, redemptions for 2 different types of points, etc. And here's the bit. While I still have a lot of the same features, a lot has been consolidated or removed. Now you probably think, why would you remove it? Well, like I said earlier, I have limited internal resources, and in order to give the bunnies the most of me that I possibly can, I think it's really important to let me focus on the game and the bunnies that are there to the best of my ability. So if it's taking me away from that, then I think it's worth looking at again and figuring out whether or not it needs to be there. And if it does, then, you know, is there a way to consolidate it and make it easier for me to execute so that I'm not thinking too much about it? I need to reduce my mental footprint when I'm here, if that makes sense. Yeah. Oh, and as for internal changes, I trust my instincts more than I did before. And I had written, I'm trying to stand up for myself more vehemently. Okay, well, that takes some explanation. I mean, in the past, people might passionately drive me to run the stream a certain way or play a certain way, something like that, right? And I think as I stream, I realized that I'm an entertainer first, and I need to abide by that. So often I have a certain instinct about something, like, is it going to be entertaining? Is it going to, for all the bunnies that aren't talking in the background, maybe they're lurking, which is totally awesome. I really appreciate the support. Then, I mean, they're not really talking or having a voice. So I have to think, or I like to think on their behalf as well. So if I'm listening to me, and I've listened to many of my videos, right, then what keeps me interested and what keeps me engaged, even though I'm not watching? Yeah. And oftentimes, if I'm doing something that's super micromanagey and it takes me away from maybe relating a story or relating an experience orally, then, you know, that's not something that I need to be doing necessarily, unless like it's a serious and critical part of the game. I hope that comes across well. Did I read everything there? Where did you get your awesome hat from? Well, Raven got it for me on Amazon. Yeah, the OG. So the OG is actually right behind me. Right back there on the bust, yeah. And then the one that I wear these days was actually gifted to me by Garrison. So he's a huge friend of the Bunny League. And he said, hey, Bunny Man, I got this for you. I think it's really gonna, I think you're really gonna like it. And he sent it to me, and then I realized that the ears move, and that just made me chuckle. So yeah, the current one that I wear, all thanks to Garrison. So there you go. Do you plan to get new neural helmets? Well, you know, if there were updates out there for the bunny hat and it was within budget, then absolutely, sure, yeah. I mean, it's not something I can really plan for because it's not like I even knew that the one with the pneumatic pumps that I use now are necessarily out there just waiting for me to use. But if bunnies see something and it's reasonably priced and I can afford it, then yeah. I'll go and get a new neural helmet. We'll just call it Mark. We'll just keep marking it up. We'll go Mark 3, Mark 4, 5, etc. Like that, yeah. By which game were you the most pleasantly surprised with as suggested by the Bunny League? Ooh, see, it's funny because a lot of the games that the bunnies have either gifted to me or requested or suggested or just had an interest in and said, I think you'll really like this. Most of the bunnies have been right, like really right. Stellaris, Subnautica, Wallworld, etc. You name it. They've all been really, really fun in their own way. Satisfactory, I'm totally obsessed with that game right now. So looking at my notes, I wrote, looking at it again, the phrase, were you the most pleasantly surprised? That implies there is a delta between my expectation and the reality of my experience with it. So as an example, if I thought, man, Wall World's going to be amazing. I saw the description for that, and it looks like it's right up my alley. And then it, in fact, was right up my alley. Then I'm not really pleasantly surprised, right? I go, yeah, that was according to my expectation, right? So I'm thinking, if I'm going by that criterion specifically, the games that were suggested to me that had the biggest delta between my own personal expectation, just glancing at it, and how much I really liked it, was probably Monster Train. I'd never played that before the Bunnies had mentioned it. And when I looked at it, the graphical style kind of looked like a phone game to me. And there's nothing wrong with that. I used to play phone games just obsessively, I'd say. So, but I really enjoyed the gameplay loop. You kind of go to the left or the right and you choose and you merge and you unlock, almost, I would say, like Hearthstone style. It's almost Hearthstone style. It was just really, really, really fun. So I still have it. I haven't gone very far in it, but I definitely saw the draw. Yeah. What else did I write? I didn't know what to expect a wall. Oh yeah, I didn't know what to expect a Wall World, as I'm not usually a fan of side scrollers, but I really, really enjoyed playing that too. And I still want to finish the game. That's right. So I've actually unlocked a lot. And Jaga, thanks again for, getting that for me. I really, really appreciate it, man. Oh, and then one last one. I was never really a fan of survival crafting games, but Subnautica blew my socks off. Absolutely. Absolutely. Subnautica is a gorgeous, polished, beautiful, terrifying, and completely wonderful open world experience with a wonderful story and narrative and pacing. So I didn't know what to expect of that. I don't really play survival crafting games, and now I've played quite a lot, I feel. So, good question. Do you think anything in your daily life will change once you reach 1,000 subs? That's a good question. As far as day-to-day routines and everything like that, because my day is broken up into its own set of routines and subroutines, right? I really, really like to have my routines because it allows me to navigate the day without expending too much of my mental energy. Yeah, I mean, that's its own thing. So I think it'll take a while for our daily lives to be affected directly by, or at least significantly enough on a daily basis, by hitting 1,000 subs on YouTube. But honestly, it's a really first great step in the right direction. And what I mean by that is when we hit that threshold, we become eligible and are now eligible for ad revenue, right? And it doesn't seem like a whole lot, but let's say I earn, I don't know, fractions of a penny on a video. And it doesn't even have to be a video I released this week. It can be on a video that I had 3 years ago, like the Battletech video that we talked about earlier. That's awesome. That's awesome. So anything that we make, it's almost like the library keeps growing, right? So whatever the bunnies like and the bunnies are willing to watch an advertisement or, click on one, I mean, that helps me out, it helps me out a great deal. And I really appreciate it. And I also wrote down, oh, right. And algorithmically speaking, YouTube considers us as a YouTube partner. So it'll be nice to see the Bunny League grow from at least potentially more exposure through the algorithm. And now we're eligible for a monetization button. So it's the first time that all of our videos and lives and things like that actually can provide additional help to the bunnies. And honestly, Raven has been so excited. She's been helping push us to this point for what feels like maybe like half a year or more. And I mean, she got kind of teary-eyed, and that means a lot to me too, that the bunnies can affect her so positively and affect our life so positively. So long story short, are we going to see a daily effect in our daily lives? Maybe not yet, but I think it's like one of those things that's a slow grower, and then eventually it hits a point where all of a sudden you're like, wow, I'm earning minimum wage. That's pretty awesome. But seriously, it's going to be pretty awesome. As a concluding question, what are your new milestones, both as a streamer and for the Bunny League? Ooh, thanks for everything. Well, A, you're very welcome. And B, I'll have to think about that. I haven't quantified new milestones with numbers and things like that. However, when that does happen, I'll be sure to let the bunnies know, because obviously I'll want everyone to be on the same page. When we're talking about just in general, though, I do want the Bunny League to continue to grow so it can facilitate the viability of continuing on as a variety streamer. I know that I kind of tend to play certain games when they interest me, and then, you know, it takes a bit to break me away break me away from that, or a routine or something like that. So that's something that I'm trying to keep in mind. How popular is a game, and how will that help the channel to grow and the bunnies to grow, right? Oh yeah, that means that if I'm playing a game that is not a part of our channel's mainline, that over time I will have proven to enough bunnies I can still provide them with an entertaining stream that is worthy of their time. And that's really important. I want to improve, and part of the way that I gauge that is how many bunnies think that my performance on a daily basis is worth the entertainment or worth their time, right? So as a side note, even though I'm not actively chasing numbers, one of the internal metrics that I use as a minimum is a 30 average viewership on Twitch, as an example. There's many times where I have got like 17 on a game, or I've got 22 average on a game over multiple weeks. And I've got a lot of bunnies that say, you know, this game's awesome, I love it. And while I may feel the exact same way, kind of like Rogue Trader, it started off a little bit above 30 and then it kind of dipped and it stayed down there. But I finished the game, but it didn't perform very well, didn't bring in a lot of new bunnies. That internal marker would be 30 for me for an average viewership, even though if you look at Twitch to be a partner, I think it's like 75 average viewership, which I'm nowhere near. So there's that to consider. Yeah, I wrote, it just lets me flag to myself whether a game or format is serving to help the Bunny League grow. Yeah, I hope that makes sense. What was your first experience to get into gaming and led you down the rabbit hole? Well, actually, I had to look this one up because I do recall I lived in Great Britain when I was in kindergarten, when I was 5, and we had one Macintosh back in the living room, or not the living room, the dining room, I recall. And I would play, and I didn't remember the name of it, but I looked it up. It's called Stunt Copter. You got like a little guy who, if you look up Stunt Copter on Google, you'll probably see what I'm talking about. There's like this little cart with a bunch of hay in it, I think, and then a helicopter that drops a little stick figure into said cart. That's it. That's what that is. Stunt Copter and Radical Castle. I remember there was like this part in Radical Castle where it says like a Vorpal bunny appears, and then there's this sound that, wah! I really don't know what that was all about. It was kind of like someone was, now that I think about it, it's probably like someone's on drugs. It was a fun game, and it got me started playing. After that, and I have to recall my notes here, when I was in elementary school, my father, he got me a 386 SX, and I was mostly into Sierra Online point-and-click adventure games. I really ended up diving into video games and getting lost in them with immersive games, kind of like Wing Commander. So Wing Commander is one of my favorites of all time. And I remember the very first wingman that you have is Spirit, and I thought she was so cool, and I sucked at the game, and then she died, and I got super teary-eyed as a kid. I got so sad that I lost Spirit. Honestly, never lose Spirit. She's a wonderful, wonderful character and a great wingman. So it was from that point on, I was like really hooked, right? What else did I write? Oh, that's right. Because of where we lived in relation to school district lines, I didn't really have a lot of friends my age. So one of the things that really got me into gaming is the fact that when I would play, my parents held me responsible for making sure, like I cleaned my room, regular stuff. But I sometimes had difficulty with that. So I found that with video games, instead of having this, I had a bit of a pressure in my head that I need to clean up. So while I'm playing, I wasn't really enjoying playing because I had this idea that I got to clean up afterwards in my head. So what I liked about video games, it freed that for me, right? So I'm playing a video game on a computer, and when I'm done, I click a button, powers down. That's it, right? Isn't that crazy, right? So it was very freeing for me. Oh yeah, I gravitated towards video games where I could play and be as messy as I wanted to be. And when I was done, I pressed the power button and my play space was all clean. Yeah, that same thing. Yeah. What is each of you two individually favorite game? I'm guessing question to Raven and HB. What are each of your favorite games? I always have trouble with favorites. I'll let you know that right now, and that's going to be a theme throughout this Q&A. I suppose it depends on where I am in my life. So as my life changes, so does my favorite game. If I'm overwhelmed and I need a distraction, then I tend to play a game where I have a high degree of like skill or competency, and I'll mute the in-game music. I'll put on music from YouTube in the background on a browser or something like that, and then I'll just grind or level endlessly. I like making progress in that state, and I'm going almost hitting like a meditative or Zen-like navigation of the game. If I'm looking to get lost in a game, then I'm looking for story, immersion, things like that. So that's where high degrees of customizability, making something personalized to me, that helps me to feel like I'm in there, and it really pulls me in when maybe I'm not necessarily looking to get lost in the sense that I'm just grinding away mindlessly, or not mindlessly, I guess not mindless, but be more present and almost like use my imagination. Maybe that's a better way to put it. Oh, and that's right. If I restrict myself from listing Battletech for a favorite game, then at the moment I'm really enjoying Satisfactory, but I tend to always go back to XCOM 2. Oh, and Lone Echo in VR. That was exceptional. Yes, it was. I like how I'm reacting to myself and what I wrote. Lone Echo is amazing. I don't know. I figure most of the bunnies that are here at this Q&A, they've probably already seen XCOM 2. They've probably already seen Battletech. They've already probably seen me play a little bit of Satisfactory. And, everyone's got their own thing. But I got to say, Lone Echo, I don't know if a lot of people have seen that game. And that game just blew me away from an immersion standpoint. It is a VR game. You do put on the Oculus Rift headset, but I was so in love with that game, and I was very sad when it was over. So, as I understand it, there's a second one that's out, but I haven't tried that yet. So, but the first one was phenomenal. So one day maybe I'll try out Lone Echo number 2. That's it. Got to write that down. Get that on the note somewhere. If left to your own devices, what 2 types of games would you gravitate towards, and 2 types that you would avoid? Gravitate towards turn-based strategy and story/immersion. Is that what I wrote? Yes. Turn-based strategy, RPGs, and story-focused, or immersion experiential games. Okay, so experiential is kind of like Firewatch, walking simulators that give a certain vibe or feeling, or have like a cinematic thing going on, right? So I wrote like, Metro Exodus. That's super cinematic from a first-person perspective, because a lot of the animations, you see your hands, and the camera work is almost like one-off at different beats. I mean, they do a really, really good job. It's not just here's the animation and you keep seeing it over and over, even if it still looks good. I mean, that was like really tailored. That was very impressive. Turn-based strategy and RPGs and story focus. I wrote Fire Emblem, Baldur's Gate, etc. Avoid would be horror. Horror, and then I had to ask Raven about this one, real-time strategy. Now, it has the word strategy in it. Why wouldn't I necessarily like that? I would avoid it just because my micro is really bad. Things are on the line, or there's almost like a timer, and I'm gonna execute in line with said timer, then I tend to just go and fall back on what it is that I am used to. So that could be, as an example, StarCraft. Great RTS. Love the incorporation of story, cool units, different variants, all kinds of stuff. I loved it. I really, really did. Company of Heroes, etc. Loved it. The problem is, at some point, my mind just sort of goes, bzz, it short circuits, and then I go, okay, what do I know? I can build barracks, I can build Marines. I'm just going to keep going through, and if the enemy throws something really advanced at me, I'll throw even more Marines at it, more Marines, and I just brute force my way through by throwing more things at something and just jumbling a giant mass of firepower at the problem until it goes away. And it's that way from the beginning of the campaign to the end of the campaign. So from that standpoint, I wouldn't want to watch me stream RTS. It sounds horrible. Good question, though. Good question. Including non-streaming games, in which game did you sink in the most hours? The type of just one more turn turning into an all-nighter. Yes. Well, I had to look this one up because I have to think about it objectively. There are the games that I like at the time, But looking at Steam and looking at the activity hours, my history says Battletech is sitting at over 3,300 hours logged. Now, that, yeah, 3,300 hours logged, and that includes mods. So I think most of that's streaming related, though. The next one on the list was XCOM 2 and War Tales. So those filled number 2 and number 3. A lot of that had to do with streaming as well. But I also played War Tales before I streamed it. So, I mean, there, take that as will. Outside of streaming, oh yeah, I ranked very highly with Kingdom Come Deliverance and any Magic the Gathering Duels of the Planeswalkers or MTG Arena or anything like that. I love card mechanics. I absolutely adore them. And actually, Friend of Entropy pointed out the Bloomborough box set that came out recently. And Raven and I have slowly been opening a pack. We got a box. We were lucky enough to get a box. And we've been slowly opening those and enjoying those on the side. So thank you. Thank you to you. In your backlog of games, which one do you think has been waiting the longest and why? I have a huge backlog of games, and there are many reasons why I haven't played or am not getting to different games. I wrote down Disco Elysium, Cyberpunk 2077, and Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous. I played through one act with the Bunnies, with stream and on YouTube, but they've all been sitting on my list for a very long time. I wrote for Disco Elysium. I played once on stream, and that was it. That was before the release of the voice pack. Is it a voice pack, or was it like a re-release of the game with the voices in it? It didn't have any voices at the time, so I had to provide all the voices. That was before that. And I think I had such a confusing and disoriented first experience in the game that I kind of just never got into it again. It was a big internal speed bump to go back in, no matter how much I hear the game is so good. It's so much better than it was that I still have it and I still plan on going back. But just that massive amount of choice and complexity, it kind of is intimidating to me. So I haven't been back to that one. Cyberpunk 2077, I really wanted to play this on stream, and I still have it earmarked to play on stream. Originally, I was waiting to get an RTX 3080, which at the time there was the whole video game shortage and Bitcoin mining. And so it was really difficult to find one, and I just didn't buy it at the thousands and thousands of dollars of prices out there for the cards. And the main reason why is it was supposed to perform really, really well, be this really nice benchmark. I don't know if any of the bunnies remember this. When I was a kid, there was that app called 3D Mark, and you could benchmark your PC. It's kind of like when people were talking about Crysis and then the video game Crysis, and whoever had the rig who could actually play Crysis at higher detail levels, it was kind of like that. So with Cyberpunk 2077, not only was it a technical, like, push the limits, the technical limits of your hardware, but also it was just wide open, and it seemed like a really cool concept. And now it's supposed to be excellent, and some of the bunnies have told me that it's like got some of the best story that they've had in their life. So that's very high praise coming from some reliable sources. So I'm definitely piques my interest. But there is the little problem of the nudity and the subject matter. So on Twitch or on YouTube, I'm hesitant. I haven't figured out how to overcome that bit. So I end up kind of teeter-tottering on the edge of whether to play it in private or play it on stream. So that's why I haven't touched it. And then lastly, Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous, played a whole first act with, I think, Bambo the Bone Rider. Bambo the Dino Rider. Bambo, that's a lot better. Makes more sense. Bambo the Dino Rider. And I loved it. Absolutely loved it. Had a great time with the bunnies. I think Ember was one of the funniest characters because she was so just, the way that I read her was almost dreamy and powerful and psychotic. I thought it was so cool. She's just this like waif of a girl who can just burn everybody in the entire area. It was just so cool. I love it. But it is very complex. And for someone who it would take, I'd have to devote myself pretty heavily to really understanding the game in order to overcome the hurdle to get back to it to play, right? So it's really, really big. It seems like this really large task to get in, and therefore I haven't picked up the momentum, and therefore I haven't gone back into it. So I've still only played through Act 1, even though I really want to finish the rest of it. So there you go. Those are the games in my backlog that have probably been sitting there for the longest, and why. Do you have a favorite Battletech game? Personally, I wish there was a newer version of Mech Commander. Okay, I would say, first of all, good taste, and I'm in total agreement about Mech Commander. Before playing Harebrained Schemes Battletech, I absolutely adored Mech Commander 2, and it wasn't something that I really ever went out to go find. I kind of stumbled into it and then loved it. There was one part that I really remember. I guess it's kind of like real-time strategy, except you could pause. I remember kind of having the enemy patrol come close to me, and then there was a ditch or a trench in the terrain, and I ended up taking, I think, probably like a jump jet Jenner or something like that, and going over in midair, tracking it and flipping around a 180, and then shooting at the back. I didn't even know that shooting at the butt was a thing at the time, but it was awesome, and I still remember it to this day. So I agree with you. Good choice. What I wrote was, yeah, Mech Commander 2 was my favorite Battletech-related game prior to Harebrained Schemes Battletech. Now it's Harebrained Schemes Battletech. I'm probably echoing much of the community when I say I wish that Battletech 2 was released on a new engine so it could be modernized even further. I bet the overhaul mods for that would be insane. Yes. So, I mean, Battletech is pretty much my favorite Battletech game. The mods do so much to make it a new game for me every time. So, yeah, I mean, it is my favorite, and I don't see that changing unless there's like a new Battletech that comes out. Yeah, so I'm lucky that I like Battletech so much, and the Bunnies do too. What drew you to Battletech? There you go. I'm honestly, Front Mission did. I was playing Front Mission, and I really fell in love with the Front Mission series on Front Mission 4. That was on the PS2 at the time. And then I really wanted to play some more, and Front Mission 5 was out. And I ended up modifying my PlayStation 2 by getting one of those flip tops. And I installed one of the flip tops because at least the American version, you hit and the CD tray slides out forward. This one, you open up the top and you can stick in a boot disc. And Front Mission 5 was only released in certain regions. I think like Japan was like the main one. I played a patched version of the ISO of Front Mission 5 on a boot-loaded PlayStation 2. The patch was just for English so that I could understand what the heck's going on. That was my favorite Front Mission. And the reason why I mention all of that is because when I finished Front Mission 5, I wanted to play some more. I wanted a game that was turn-based, that, in this case, there were Wanzers. I actually have back there, by that little pine tree back there, is a Wanzer from Front Mission. And I just loved it so much. And it leaned into that sci-fi realism style that I really, really like. I mean, there's a lot of anime mechs out there, and they can be really cool. I mean, anime just has style, but I liked leaning into that sci-fi realism, and I liked just the cinematic style of it, if that makes sense. So it's kind of like when you get turn-based, you make the decision, you execute the decision, and then the game almost like plays out. Like, you can almost imagine that you weren't making those decisions during the pause, and it goes out and you have this cinematic experience. The camera follows in, the mech engages the skates, it goes across, pumps in, a pike, and then slams it, and then a big piston goes in and knocks the mech off its feet. There's momentum, it slides out. All of that because you clicked a button when you had a billion years to make the decision, right? When I search for those parameters on Google, game like Front Mission, mech turn-based strategy game, Battletech's Kickstarter came up, and I ended up, after reading it through and seeing their Kickstarter video for it, I ended up backing it, right? I just had the desire for a more cinematic feel to a turn-based strategy, mech, sci-fi realism game. That desire for a more cinematic feel to a turn-based strategy game heavily influenced the development of my streaming style. Yeah, I agree. I was a bit unsure because it seemed to play slowly and lack some of the Front Mission cinematic panache, but it turned out to be one of my favorites. Yeah. What is your favorite mech? Remember how we talked about favorites? And here's the addition. Here's the kicker. You only get one. So most of the time when I talk about my favorites in terms of mechs, I'm talking about top whatever per class, right? So let's say Highlander in the assault, Timberwolf in the heavy, if I had to choose favorites, and even that's difficult for me. So it's a very difficult question. Yeah, it's kind of like asking someone to choose from their children who's their favorite. But I'll have to say the Timberwolf. Because it was on the Box of Mech Warrior 2, and that was the first entry into Battletech's universe that I ever had. B, I love how the catapult looks aesthetically, and obviously Timberwolf, Mad Cat, Intersphere name for the Timberwolf. I mean, catapult's in there. It's got some of that catapult DNA, and I just think it fits a lot of roles. So if I could, I would totally play an entire career. If somehow this happened, I'd totally play an entire career with all Timberwolves, because as an Omnimech, you can kind of outfit it in different ways and just play the game like that. I think that would be really cool. And it would be really awesome if they're all uniform. I love this kind of stuff. If they're all uniform and then doing the same thing, and I can just picture in my head this like highly trained, really tight knit group that's just like, doing the whole thing. Man, it'd be so cool. I'd be all about it. I think it'd be awesome. What is your favorite vehicle that does not fly in Battletech? So this one caught me off guard when I thought about it. It's funny because I thought favorite vehicle that doesn't fly. I don't like any vehicles that fly. And then I forgot that VTOLs are VTOLs are vehicles, and I use VTOLs all the time now. I typically don't consider myself to be well-versed in vehicles in the Battletech world, and I tend to predominantly use artillery vehicles. I'm talking about things like the Teppo or the Paladin or the Shieldtron Prime with the double arrow 4s. So I don't really know if I'm the best to answer that question. However, right now in Rogue Tech, in the latest career, my favorite is probably the Wraith Massacre. So that thing has 60 micro missiles on it. It has stealth. It has incredible speed under the right conditions, and it has an advanced AMS. So missiles coming in, not only do they have to contend with the stealth, but they also have to contend with getting through the advanced AMS coverage. And it's just a phenomenal vehicle. It's basically my flanking element in an endgame situation where most of the mechs in the Lance are very slow. So I really, really, really dig it. I think it's my favorite right now. Yeah, of all the vehicles. Irby fan or not? Oh, fan, but I tend not to run them just because I consider them to be slow. But I love it. I even got the plushie Irby. So I have the plushie Irby here in my bunny den down here. So yeah, I'm a fan. I like it, but I just don't tend to use them in the game. Ooh, okay. So this one I might need to read more. Feelings on Rogue Tech versus Battletech Advanced, and what do you like most about Rogue Tech, and what do you like the most about BTA? So I'm going to answer those together just because they're similar, and also this is my personal opinion. I know that there's strong supporters of both sides, so it's just my personal opinion. To provide some context, my memory is not the best, so the amount of time that it takes me to accomplish something matters to me, if only to allow me to tie different moments of a career together into a larger tapestry of actions and events. So what I'm talking about there is, like, if you think back on a career and that career goes on for a very long time, chances are, if I'm in that situation, I have a difficult time recalling certain moments in the beginning versus now and how we got here. And that's important to me because it's kind of like an overarching story. It's your story, right? So there's a certain level of importance that I put on in being able to go through a career within a shorter period of time, maybe like a month or two, in order to allow me to keep track of the story in my head, if that makes sense. Because of that, my answers will have a lot to do with career progression, and therefore I want to define the life cycle of my typical in-game careers. I'm the type of player that likes to play from the lightest tonnage range all the way to whatever is considered the rarest or biggest that I can possibly own. That's how I feel like I've kind of seen a little bit of everything. I know that there's a lot of play styles out there where bunnies really, really enjoy, let's say, the early game. That's the best part for them because it's challenging, it's difficult, it's exciting. You can die like that almost at any moment. So, I mean, I like that too, but then I also love to try the really big lumbering stuff that can barely move, like an annihilator that can barely move, and just the biggest guns you can possibly fit on there, right? So I like to experience the full spectrum. Both BTA and Rogue Tech give me a taste of similar things in two very different ways. If I'm looking to experience the entire progression from the beginning of a career to its end in a somewhat timely and streamlined manner, then I think that BTA is what I tend to choose. I can have a themed career around being a pirate, and it unfolds at a pace where I can recall the beginning of the career when I am at its progressive end. So that's just what I was talking about earlier, right? In BTA, there's no shortage of variety in ammunition, equipment mechanics, etc. And yet there are fewer options available at most levels of the game in direct comparison to Rogue Tech. As a result, I find myself less consumed by analysis paralysis while still feeling like I can experience a bit of everything. So, I mean, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Essentially, you know, if you want fast cam and you want to play with mines, you can do that in BTA. You can also do that in Rogue Tech. Rogue Tech may have a lot more types of fast cam. I don't know. Or maybe you want to play with AMS. You have advanced AMS, you have standard AMS, you've got clan AMS, you've got different types of AMS, but Rogue Tech probably has more AMS and has AMS specific quirks on specific mechs, and those are measured by how many, let's say, like over 100 missions that a pilot plays in order to unlock it, right? That's a lot of missions for a stream, let's say. So all I'm saying is that there's a certain level of complexity, and yet with BattleTech Advanced, you can still partake in maybe the main categories of things that I might be interested in, but because there are fewer options available, there's something to be said about not getting stuck and just playing missions, right? And oftentimes I'll consider all of the options in front of me, and then I get stuck mentally. So it doesn't happen as often with BattleTech Advanced, is all I'm saying. If I'm looking to play one mod for a very long time and I measure my career progression in terms of like an in real life year or more, not months, then I tend to lean towards Rogue Tech. Yeah. So like if I had to choose one mod to play for all time, I'd probably choose Rogue Tech, right? Just because the level of detail and the variety of things that I can try and set up there are unmatched as far as I can tell, right? So I said, there are some mods that look to preserve certain defining characteristics of a mech chassis or variant and therefore fix or lock things in. So when you fight against that mech on the battlefield, it'll feel like that mech. The first thing that comes to mind is like BattleTech Extended Commander's Edition, like Extended 3025. I remember End of Steel is fixed on some mechs, or, you know, the core cannot be changed of some mechs. And the rationale, I believe at the time, was when you fight against XYZ mech or XYZ variant, those variant, of course, a specific variant of a mech, then people who know the lore and have experienced the lore are able to, like, it feels right, if that makes sense. I mean, right is subjective, but it feels right, and I can totally understand that. And one of the things I really liked about 3025 is, or I guess BEXE, is that when I played it as someone who's completely new and has forgotten a lot of the lore, even though it's been explained to me many times over, I kind of get a crash course or an educational boost from playing the game. And I can almost imagine what it would be like in a specific situation, because there are limitations placed on some of the mechs and some of the scenarios such that it would be as close as possible to, let's say, how it would be in the BattleTech universe, right? Now, Rogue Tech still locks things in mechs, but in some ways it does it to a lesser degree from other mods, and therefore you have more freedom to make a mech as you see fit. And as a result, almost any mech you run into, you're never really sure what you're going to get. Like, it's like the Forrest Gump box of chocolates rule, right? I mean, it might be something completely unexpected. So yeah, then I wrote, I think sometimes people who value BattleTech lore may not like a world where to them, it feels like they're no longer in the BattleTech universe, because some Some mad lad decided to make an Irby that can charge an assault mech from across the battlefield and blow itself up. Others may look at the situation and go, my God, that's awesome, right? So that's just expounding upon what I had mentioned before. It should be noted that I may look at a mech in BTA, and this is a good point, and it is a lot easier for me to imagine its maximum potential or its ceiling, right? With Rogue Tech, I'm still on the Discord listening to freaking mech geniuses like S1PA. I never heard the guy or gal or whoever they are, but God, they know the game in and out. It's kind of insane. So I still will look at the Rogue Tech Discord and see what their opinion is on different things and then kind of try to incorporate that because they know it a lot better than I do. Yeah, they know the possibilities, they know the edges, but in Rogue Tech, if I look at a mech, I never think, yeah, oh yeah, I've seen the maximum potential. I can imagine the maximum potential of this mech. Now, if I'm in a different mod, maybe there are enough limitations there where I can see the boundaries within which I could play. And as a result, I'm like, oh yeah, I can imagine the maximum potential. I probably am not going to use that chassis. If that makes sense, yeah? Oh, and then finally, in Rogue Tech, there was an entire endgame of super heavy missions that progress up to ludicrous levels. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, but I'm a fan of bigger and crazier mechs. So when Rogue Tech says you'll get to see super heavies often, if you progress far enough, then I'm all in. I mean, that's pretty straightforward. So in the end, when people talk about Rogue Tech versus Battletech Advanced, I think a lot of people are really concerned with their own time. You have people who can play longer sessions less often. You have people who can play more often but smaller sessions. In the end, there's a set amount of information to ingest about the mod in order to enjoy it, and we as humans, we have a finite amount of time. So in short, if my favorite part of Battletech is the progression in early game or getting to experience multiple careers in the Battletech universe in a shorter in real life period of time, I choose Battletech Advanced. If I want to choose a mod and stick with one career over a really long period of time, I can't get enough of tweaking things over and over and over, like that's my jam, and until they're just right, then, oh, also if you love super heavies, then I would choose Rogue Tech. That's my best attempt at answering that question. Hopefully it makes sense. What was the last book that you read, and would you recommend it to others? Well, the last book that I read, I believe, was like the second I think it was the third book in the Witcher series. I tend to read to Raven out loud. I'm fortunate enough that she seems to like me reading out loud, and I enjoy reading out loud. So we moved over to the Witcher series because we watched the Netflix series, and we absolutely adored it. So the last one was called The Blood of Elves from the Witcher series. So it kind of, there are times, it kind of almost reminds me of Tolkien in Lord of the Rings, like the written form, where maybe Tolkien might explain or describe an environment, or he spends a little more time on it than I would like. And I do see that a bit in the Witcher books, but I remember The Blood of Elves being, it started to really pick up like halfway through the book, and it didn't let up, and I thought it provided a really nice set of insights into certain relationships between certain characters that I found just really, really great and stimulating. So as far as that goes, if you like The Witcher, I would imagine that I could recommend it, although I think it's like one of those things where you either like it or you don't. Now, one book that I read a little before that I can wholeheartedly recommend was actually by the same author that wrote Lockwood & Co., which was also, we saw that on Netflix, and that was awesome. So much so that oh, look at that, there's a pattern, that we went out and we read the books. Yeah. And that one was by the author Jonathan Stroud. So he wrote a book. It was his own series, and I think he only has the first one out, but he's actively writing the second one. It's called The Outlaws Scarlet and Brown by Jonathan Stroud. I love that book. That's a phenomenal book. It covers an unlikely pair of kids, a gunslinger, and sort of a lab rat, I suppose, for trying to avoid spoilers, and how they come together with each other in unorthodox situations, and how their individual motivations allow them to kind of learn from each other and stay together. It's really good. I would definitely recommend that. That's The Outlaws Scarlet and Brown by Jonathan Stroud. If you could go back in time to your youth, what would you say to your teenage self? So I wrote something here that I'll probably have to read straight up, because when I was younger, I mean, even to some extent now, I have a lot of difficulty taking advice. So actually, I'll just read it. This is probably what I would say to myself when I was a teenager. I won't give you advice because I know that will not work. Instead, I'll tell you some things that I've learned about us, and maybe, just maybe, it will give you hope where you have little. You're very good at becoming what you need to be in order to survive, and as such, your ability to hide in plain sight is only trumped by the fact that, above all, you're a good person, despite what at times you may think about yourself. Which means, even though you stick out to those who would hurt you, it only happens because you value others' well-being over your own. It is a cost that I have personally chosen to accept as the price of helping others. I know that you think yourself selfish and undeserving of love, that there is a line that separates everyone else from you and the love that you will never have. It will not turn out that way. You have already affected people in a positive way without even realizing it, and you won't really find out until you're absent from their lives for a time. You will have a family of your choosing, and they will not abandon you even when the smallest person inside of you feels like hiding from the rest of you. The thoughts and feelings that you have, that you believe to be bad, are part of you, and are part of most people out there. It is not a fight between angels and demons that you need to suppress or destroy. Remember, you're a good person, and good people choose to do good things even though they have the capacity for darkness inside. Also, a little bit of advice that I think you will be okay with: try to give cats another try. You'll find that you actually really love them. And that last bit was just because when I was a kid, I remember my adopted aunt and uncle. They're lovely people, and they accepted into their home different animals that were just kind of, maybe they were strays or whatnot. And because they're wonderful people, they just kept coming back. I remember my first interaction, like real set of interactions with cats, were over with them, like when I would go and visit. And they'd scratch me up all over the place. And I was convinced that I'm just incredibly allergic to cats. And look at me now. I love cats. My kids are cats. So it's definitely something where I had to give them another try. And it actually took Raven to introduce me to cats again for me to step out of my comfort zone and go and do it. And I'm so glad that I did, because I love Jimmy and Jade so much. And I love both of my girls now that have passed. And I think they're just lovely. Absolutely lovely. So that's what I would say to myself. If you come to Germany, there's two questions here. If you come to Germany, which places would you like to visit? If you come to Germany, what would you like to try? Well, I will answer these two together because it's a rather simple desire. I love soft pretzels, and I would like to go to a bakery in, hopefully I'm saying this correctly. I would like to go to a bakery in Dachsbach and try soft pretzels made by Arndt Erbel. Apparently he's like a god of dough. So that would be my desire, and that is what I would like to try. So hopefully you found that interesting. Thank you for submitting all of the lovely questions, and thank you so much for all your support for hitting 1,000 subs on YouTube. I know it seems like a small thing, but to Raven and I, it means a lot. So thank you again for being on the journey, and I hope that you'll continue to be with us for many more journeys. So high five, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day.